The information contained in this video is intended for educational purposes. We are not responsible for any damage to your device resulting from improper disassembly or installation. Proceed at your own risk.
Hey, this is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today we're going to take apart an HTC One Max. This is a moderately difficult task, so if you don't have any experience with cell phone repair, you might want to take this to a professional. Fortunately, this phone is a lot easier to open than the M7. There is actually a release button on the side that will allow you to remove the rear panel. So, unfortunately, that does not mean that you can change your battery out. It just means that you can take the panel off for the most part. Once we get this off, on the inside we're going to have lots and lots of screws, which is very typical for HTC. The interesting thing is they actually used a tri-point screw on the outer edge of this rear panel. They've also hidden quite a few of the screws underneath tape, and they've put warranty stickers on at least one of them. So you're going to have quite a lot of material to organize. Down there at the bottom left, there's another sticker that covers the screw. So sit back and get comfortable. This is not an easy repair. It's just very complex, which again is pretty typical of HTC. We've got a sticker up here that actually hides a flat flexible cable. So we're going to open up this gate very carefully. I recommend you use a soft tool rather than a razor blade. Again, unless you've got quite a bit of experience. This other little piece of tape can also be peeled back at this point, and it will reveal another screw, which is actually going to be a 000 Phillips or a Japanese industrial standard of the same size. You notice he also took the sticker off at the bottom left-hand corner at this point. So this big barcode label, you can peel this back as well. And that will expose even more stuff that we have to get to take this phone apart. The foil tape, I would set that aside. Of course, you want to try to get that off in one piece if possible. Now we have our outer screws. We'll go ahead and speed this up so we can get these taken out. Make sure that they are all accounted for. You don't want to leave any screws behind at the point when you start prying. And then switch your bit over. We have one in the center here, again, that is not going to be a tri-point, so you will need to have a Phillips driver that will fit that one. Once we've got these out, getting the rear panel off isn't too difficult. You can just kind of pry around the edges, take your time, and of course, do not put any stress on the case. This flex cable we want to very carefully slide out first, as it is attached to the rear housing. I would recommend a small pair of precision tweezers if you have them on hand. We were able to get it out with the corner of a razor blade, but again, be very careful if you do something like this. If your hand slips and you cut through the cable, you will have to replace that component as well. And from here, we can just kind of work our way around the edges of the phone. And again, not too tough on this one, which is quite a relief because after working on the M7, a lot of technicians really don't like to work on many of the HTC phones that are being made nowadays. Be very careful, of course, near the volume rocker and power button and charging port. You don't want to put any stress on those as you're working your way around here. So I generally kind of skip over those areas and just pry the plastic frame surrounding them. But again, you'll see not too much effort involved here. We can go ahead and remove the rear panel, and then we get into more complicated stuff on the inside. 3 screws at the top secondary board, 4, and then we've got 4 here on the main board, and then 2 down here for the battery cable, and several also at the bottom. So screws all over the place, most of them different sizes. Be sure to keep it organized. First thing we want to do though is disconnect the battery. So we'll take out these screws down here, and then we'll have a pop connector, which you might have to take a little bit of time and exercise finesse in getting underneath this little panel. Of course, we don't want to put any pressure on any of the surrounding components, but we do need to pry this pop connector directly away from the phone. And then the cable will kind of bend down towards the bottom. Once we've got the battery cable disconnected, we're going to remove some screws from the bottom end. And again, set these aside, keep them organized, all different sizes. 4 in the center of the logic board. And as you disconnect this, watch out, it is going to most likely go flying across the room. All right, we'll go ahead and take these screws out at the top. The one that actually went through the logic board. And then we've got some antenna wires to disconnect, as well as flex cable at the bottom, and the vibrator motor has to be moved at some point. So very carefully get underneath these. I'd probably recommend using a soft tool rather than a screwdriver. You don't want to put any stress on these wires. If you break them, you're going to have a tough time coming up with a replacement. You will most likely have to pull it off of another phone. Over here, we've got a couple pieces that need to pull up, and I'll give you a closer look here in just a second on the inside of this. Very typical of HTC. 2 cables, one on either side of the board. One pulls away easily. Another one we're going to have to pretty much heat up the bottom of, you'll see here shortly, and we can go ahead and peel this label back. You'll see this kind of interfaces on the opposite side. Very interesting design. Down here we've got some capped on tape covering a flat flexible cable. So you'll want to very carefully open this gate, and again, just pull the cable out. Small tweezers work pretty good for that. And we have an antenna wire down here that we can disconnect. You will run into some tape here and there. I would recommend that you remove the tape, set it aside, and do keep in mind where it was located. You can always watch later on in the video for the reassembly, but we don't want to get this stuff mixed up and end up with it in the wrong spot. I do like to kind of stick it close to the area I was working on so that when I come back, it kind of serves as a reminder to put it back into position. And you can see that's actually soldered onto that flex cable underneath. So we're going to have to pull this bottom end away from the frame. I would recommend you apply some heat here and then go under it with a soft tool. You may have to use a screwdriver to get started. It's pretty tight down there, so need something that can go between the PCB and the metal frame. And once you get that pulled away, you can kind of just lift this up all towards the top. And do be careful, once in a while you will run into some adhesive, so we want to make sure we don't put any stress on these. And if you've got tape, of course, we want to move that out of the way as well. Over here, we've got some foil tape that's going to be covering 3 flex cable connections. So we'll want to just peel this off very carefully. Again, if you've got a heat gun, you might want to warm this up a bit. And be very careful as you peel it. You don't want it to be sticking to any of these as you pull on it. And the interesting thing is we've got 2 different directions that these are going to be opened up in. So the bottom one, you're going to come in from the right hand side and flip the gate up. On the upper 2, you're actually going to come in from the left hand side. So do make sure you pry these in the correct direction and not to put any stress, unnecessary stress. It's very easy to break these, and if you do, you'll most likely have to replace the entire board. Pretty tough to remove these and solder them back on. And of course, we have even more tape. So get used to this if you're working with HTC. There's always tons of tape all over the place. And we want to make sure we've got it all peeled off before we pull anything out. Otherwise, you can rip these flex cables pretty easily. But they will all slide over to the left. And of course, when you put it back together, if they're not seated properly, you're going to lose functionality of one thing or another. So you want to make sure you get them put in fully when you put the phone back together. More tape down here at the bottom holding this cable in place. So we'll just kind of peel this from the edge. And then we can kind of very carefully just slide that off down towards the bottom. Make sure that you have all of your cables disconnected before you lift the motherboard out. And if it looks like it's getting snagged, you want to move these wires out of the way just to be safe. Anything that gets caught on here can cause you some problems. And we've got a little bit of adhesive under the board, so you might have to pry just a bit. Again, if you've got a heat gun, that always helps. And you can see it's kind of sticking to the tape on the battery down here at the bottom. So if you peel it slow, you can probably keep that piece intact and just pull it all away from the battery. And now we'll go ahead and remove the secondary board from the top. We've got a few screws that we need to remove. And then we want to disengage the vibrator motor from the area that it's lodged into, because the wires kind of go over the top there. So you just pop that out and set it aside. And then your infrared will most likely go flying across the room here also when we get to that point. But we want to disconnect that first from the top. And now we should be able to lift the logic board away from the frame. Again, take your time. You will run into some adhesive here and there. You don't want to force this. But we can pretty much lift this all out with the attached cables. Set that aside. And if you need to remove your infrared, just pry it from the top and you will see it almost acts like it's spring-loaded. So a good thing you can do is just kind of shield the top of this with your hand or hold it in place as you're prying. That way it doesn't get lost. Lots of adhesive on this battery. I would recommend that you use a heat gun. Once again, we will end up peeling that foil tape at the bottom away from the battery. First thing we're going to do, though, is remove these two screws. And that will allow us to remove the retaining plate at the bottom. And we can carefully pry this speaker assembly away from the frame. Be sure you do not poke the speaker underneath. You can see it's right there about the center. All right, so next thing we're going to do is pry around the edges of the battery. We've got some pretty heavy-duty adhesive under here. I do recommend you use a heat gun, warm this up, and take your time. You'll see here shortly that even at 8 times normal speed, this will take a little time and effort, so don't rush it. And if you pull on the battery too much, it is possible to fracture something on the inside. You'll actually see it kind of bend if you pull against it while it's still stuck in place. So take your time, pry very carefully, and little by little you should be able to get it to release with the original adhesive. And again, when you get down to the bottom, this foil tape, you'll actually want to peel it off of the battery. We were going to try to take it out from the housing. As you can see, he's kind of pulling on it, but it doesn't seem to be separating in a way that would make it the reassembly easy. So I'd recommend you just peel this tape off of the battery itself. Now, if you were doing a screen replacement, you would also want to remove that speaker at the top of the frame. But you can buy the entire screen with the mid-frame installed, and this is pretty much as far as you'd have to go other than removing that speaker at the very top. From here, I'm going to go ahead and let the video run. You can find links to parts and repair tools in the video description, also in the video itself. If you are using a computer, it will probably not show up on a mobile device. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section below, and I'll go ahead and let you put your phone back together.